This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world at large. John Bailey, and with me, Jim Benerofe, the Dean of Journalism in the City of White Plains, and the anchor for all seasons, Peter Katz, and headlines from Jim.
And now, here are the headline stories for the week of March 23rd, 2018. County legislators tell power companies communicate better, improve timing of mutual aid to repower faster. Big storm impacts underestimated, power companies say. We'll meet again, legislators demand, to evaluate power company suggestions to improve response. Leaders on board of county legislature give rigorous review to standard amusements. Playland deal. Some say, tear it up. White Plains Housing Authority unveils Phase 2 of Winbrook rebuild at Planning Board. County Executive George Latimer endorses early voting for Westchester County. White Plains March for Our Lives encouraging strong anti-gun legislation happens Saturday in White Plains. Metro North Railroad Station improvements, cosmetic, no new construction or facility suggested. Metro North Railroad's third March snowstorm taken in stride by White Plains Public Works. Next week is opening day of the 2018 baseball season, and Donald Trump is still the president.
Thank you. Now, Rolo Newsreel March of Time, and that was the public hearing staged by the County Board of Legislators to hear from Con Edison and New York State Electric and Gas on the reasons for the delays in restorations. Peter.
Restoration of power after the storms, and what they heard was pretty much what we had heard last week here on White Plains Week when John McAvoy, the head of Con Edison, explained what they were up against in these very severe storms that have hit the Northeast. Now, what you're going to see are some excerpts from the county board's meeting with the Con Edison and NYSEG representatives. This video runs about 7 minutes, and we urge you to pay particular attention to what is being said, because it will explain a lot of what the utility companies were up against. In their explanations, they will also reveal why they had such difficulty responding and why so many people found themselves without power for more than a week.
In Westchester, we serve 6 towns, including Bedford, Lewisboro, North Salem, Pound Ridge, Somers, and Yorktown. And as you know, and as you've said, the entire area was severely impacted by both Storm Riley on March 2nd and Storm Quinn, which arrived later, directly on the heels of Riley on March 7th. Prior to the onset of the 2 winter storms that impacted millions of homes and businesses across the East Coast from Virginia to New England, the NYSEG and RG&E personnel followed their approved emergency plans, and we staged approximately 850 line and tree resources across the company's overall service area as early indications were that this would be a widespread event covering most of New York State. Initial staging in Brewster Division, Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess counties was a combination of local, contractor, and company resources. Once the magnitude of the impacts of the first storm on different areas became known, the magnitude of impacts in the Brewster Division showed this to be one of the hardest hit areas in the state. In response, NYSEG grew its complement of line and tree workers to more than 1,200 personnel comprised of local NYSEG workers, local contract line workers, additional resources from other areas of New York, resources from our Connecticut and Maine affiliates, Central Maine Power, United Illuminating, and RG&E, Rochester Gas and Electric, and mutual assistance resources from our two partnerships, one nationwide and one within New York State. And this workforce was supplemented with more than 1,000 customer service, field, and management staff. This team continued working when the second nor'easter struck on March 7th, responding to more than 4,000 downed wire and dangerous tree conditions, including wires down on occupied cars and municipal plows. In total, the damage to Brewster Division for both storms Riley and Quinn totaled more than 2,600 wires down just in these locations, 300 broken poles, and damage to both transmission and distribution infrastructure. More than 72,000 customers in the company's Brewster Division were impacted. As outlined in our electric emergency response plan, the company first engaged in make-safe activities to de-energize downed wires or to guard downed wires until they could be de-energized or repaired. During the restoration phase, we first concentrated on the transmission system, the backbone of our infrastructure, and then moved to the distribution system where we worked on substations and circuits associated with the largest number of customer outages. And this was followed by circuits with smaller customer outage counts until all customers were restored.
On the Tuesday of the storm, we went to the mutual aid group to request Tuesday before the storm, I'm sorry. To make some requests for labor, a small amount, because at the time that forecast was for what seemed like wind and rain, not nearly to the extreme that we ended up getting. As we got closer and forecast really the day before, really significantly the winds were increased and far longer than we expected. We made another request into the mutual aid process to go beyond obviously what we had requested and gotten. At that point, all the neighboring utilities would be holding their crews because they were all going to be impacted by the same in the neighboring area. When that impact came on Friday, neighboring utilities were holding onto the crews because much of the eastern coast was impacted. So there was not going to be a release from the immediate area. So that mutual aid request went further out, and that's when we saw crews traveling from further away. So that did take some time, but that really speaks to the real size of the storm. Basically a hurricane-like storm, and the amount of geography that was taken into account. So those resources started coming in as requested, but it was a day or two, it was 2 days later.
So I think it's important to remember, I think one thing that's confounded a lot of us in thinking about even during the storm and how we thought about the response since the storm is that the Tuesday before that Steve's talking about, we were forecasting, all of us were forecasting a very different storm than that which arrived on Friday. And if you look at the number of jobs, for example, in Hurricane Irene, we had 1,800 jobs that had to be done to bring people back to power. In this storm, we had 5,500 jobs in the ConEd and NYSEG territory. We were not having conversations about a hurricane-like event before any of us with our municipal partners. But that's certainly what arrived in terms of the impact on the electric system in the ConEd and NYSEG territory. And so when you're preparing for a storm the Tuesday before, you have to prepare for the storm that you are predicting is coming on Friday. So the mutual aid process that Steve is talking about is the preparations we're making on Tuesday for the storm that arrived on Friday. After the storm that arrived on Friday, which didn't actually finish until Saturday in terms of a wind event, we were still getting outages, and you size your mutual aid to the number of outages you were experiencing. And so that's why if you look at the timeline of when we're requesting mutual aid, it begins to ramp up. It was confounded by the fact that it was a very widespread storm, as Steve mentioned, across the eastern seaboard. So we had to request crews from Wisconsin, from California, from Texas, Louisiana, South Carolina. And so that is how the mutual aid process is supposed to work. But it's just important to put it in context of the amount of work in terms of the widespread damage, in terms of the amount of jobs that had to be done. This was a particularly devastating storm for our electric system. And the words we often talk about restoration, which is the most important part because that's when people get their power back. But in actuality, the words we're using in terms of internally about what this storm is, we're talking about rebuilding. In many places, we fundamentally had to rebuild the electric grid. To your second question about the misinformation the constant misinformation, this is something that John McAvoy has acknowledged we had a problem with. And Steve can talk about the particulars, but we have acknowledged that we had an issue in providing restoration times to customers after, and has been a big part of what we need to figure out how to do differently. There's really two problems that happened with our system that gave people misinformation about when they would be restored. We focused on when we were going to have 90% of people restored. We actually did have 90% of people restored Tuesday before Quinn. And if you look at Riley and Quinn together, this is something that really hampered the efforts to get people restored and the system rebuilt. Because we had 90% of people restored on Tuesday, and then we picked up another 30,000 outages the next day.
And Mike Kaplowitz, the county legislature, about 2 hours later during the hurricane, during the hearing, said that perhaps ConEd might consider flying in trucks. NYSEG said they had done that in the past, or perhaps building up a fleet of trucks to be on standby to go where needed on an instant notice. Good ideas. And Catherine Parker, another county legislator on an entirely different matter, held a press conference saying that she felt that the County Board of Legislators should reject the Playland standard amusements deal. And last night, Benjamin Boykin talked more about it. Peter?
Indeed, there was an event in White Plains last night, and if you listen closely, you could hear the word Playland murmured.
The Business Council of Westchester held a reception for members of the County Board of Legislators at the C.V. Rich Mansion in White Plains on March 22nd. After a cocktail hour gave council members and legislators a chance to get to know one another informally, there was a formal question and answer session. On some minds was reviewing the deal to bring in a private operator to take over the county amusement park, Playland. The new chairman of the Board of Legislators is Benjamin Boykin.
Attendance is around the 500-some thousand mark. It used to be up to 1 million. And really, when you take out the debt that has been put on Playland, which is not put on our other parks, Playland is almost at a break-even situation. So can the county make money? I think it all depends upon attendance and getting attendance at a certain level. But also, Playland is going to need a significant amount of capital investment.
Is the county in a perilous situation should it cancel out of this contract that was negotiated under the Astorino administration?
Well, that's why we're taking a very deep dive. The administration is looking at the contract, seeing if Standard Amusements is in compliance with the contract. We're going to be looking at it too to see where we stand. So I'm not so sure we'd be in a perilous situation. What we need to do is get the facts, get the information, do the analysis, and see where we stand.
Marcia Gordon is president and CEO of the Business Council.
It's essential that we have a relationship with our county board. And this year we have so many, not only a new county executive, but so many new board members that we have a dialogue with them about issues that are important to business.
What kind of feedback have you been getting? There certainly is a change in the power structure in the county now. What is your impression from the feedback you're getting as to their attitude towards small business and large business?
Well, the feedback we've been getting is that everyone's interested in creating jobs. And what we've been encouraged about is that the board really wants to listen to business. So, and we are here to provide business people for them to listen to. And so if there are issues, if there's legislation that's being proposed, we can get together, small businesses in particular and large businesses, and say, how will this legislation affect you? And so we've been encouraged by the open dialogue. We're encouraged by the response tonight of our members who want to talk and the legislators who want to meet business and interact.
And you know, John, one area where jobs are created here in Westchester, a major area, is development and construction. And we learned something about some construction about to take place right here in White Plains.
Right, and that is the shocker of the week. At the planning board Tuesday evening, they heard from Matt Carter of the White Plains Housing Authority about this new development coming up that is going to be being planned for right next to the Playland, which is seen in the left. This is a view of South Lexington Avenue looking across South Lex into where the new building would be. It's a 129-unit mixed income apartment building with lots of amenities, plus a green mall and street in the foreground of the picture.
Now this actually is phase 2 of the Winbrook housing project redevelopment.
That's the site. The orange area being.
Do we know
the
what
actual
any of the
building.
amenities are?
Oh, 4-bedroom apartments on the first floor, 3 and 2.
No, I said amenities. You know, what are they going to have in addition to apartments? Anything?
Well, yes, they're going to have a workout area, a club. They're going to have dryers and washing machines on every floor. I mean, and no going down to the laundry room. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be pretty upscale.
Now they have brought in a fairly well-heeled firm to handle the development here. It's called Trinity, and they're based in Boston. And they have done a whole slew of projects, mostly affordable housing, working with various housing authorities around the country.
Yes, they have 31 completed buildings in their history, which dates back to 1988, and 9,000 units in all.
That's a lot of apartments that
yes,
have developed.
Yes, it is. A lot of people have to live somewhere.
And we understand the cost of this second building at Winbrook is supposed to be $63 million. Right. Now that, if I'm correct, is about $20 million more than this first building, the Prelude,
yes,
that they did finish.
By the way, at the end, Lynn Oliver, who is on the planning board, asked what the scaffolding is around the Prelude. This is about a 4-year-old building. And Matt Carter said, well, some bricks have been falling off the top. And she asked, well, what is the reason? He says, well, we're in litigation, but that's all he would say. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, more to come on that one. Right.
Well, one would have to wonder on a young building, why are bricks falling off the facade?
It's not even 50 years old. Right.
Certainly not.
No, certainly not. And now, one other mention I want to make on Playland, Peter, is that Kristen Wilson, the Corporation Counsel of the City of Rye, told me Wednesday that the City of Rye has filed an appeal of the rejection of their right of final approval on Playland structures and redesign.
Okay, so while the Board of Legislators is doing its review and while the administration is doing its review, court is doing a very different kind of review.
Yes, plenty of time to look over that contract.
And you know, John, there's another interesting bit in real estate that we picked up this week. You remember the Mamaroneck movie theater, that big old theater. They did vaudeville in there at one time, and eventually it was carved up into multiplex cinemas, and then it was closed a couple of years ago. The idea was that the operator, Bowtie Cinemas, wanted to redevelop, putting in retail. There was a proposal to tear the whole thing down and build apartments down there. Turns out it's going to open up as movie theaters again.
Yes.
The property has been sold to a New York firm, and they're going to reopen it. And there is the marquee of the Mamaroneck movie theater, right on Mamaroneck Avenue, right in the heart the downtown area, and they promise to have 6 luxury movie theaters operating there very soon. That's a little competition for White Plains. City Center's
Absolutely.
You
theaters.
could have revival movies there, re-showing old movies and stuff like that.
And at night, I don't think the Mamaroneck police are as aggressive as the White Plains parking meter.
No, they
people.
are not. It's a pleasure. I have never gotten a parking ticket in Mamaroneck. Right. Now, perhaps we should put together a vaudeville act.
This is a vaudeville
Get
act,
my
John. I
cane
got news
and my
for you.
top hat. I have my fedora. Right. Now, George Latimer went to Portchester, the senior center, the John Bosco Center, and signed a petition calling for early voting in Westchester County. You can read all about why he thinks this is a great idea.
You know,
Convenience, mainly.
it works in some places.
Yeah.
It gets people to participate in an election instead of having to do it all on one day and go out. You can vote early over a longer period of time.
Vote early. And
leading up to election.
Early
day.
and often. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's right.
As they say in
Early and
Chicago.
That's what they do say.
Yes, I apologize to the Board of Elections. Now, March for Our Lives, Saturday, 1 p.m.
Yeah, globally, there's something like 800 marches planned. The biggest one in Washington, D.C., they expect 500,000 to be out there. It's largely students, largely high school students, that have started this movement, anti-gun movement, reaction to the Parkland massacre and a whole bunch of other shootings here in White Plains. So far, 4,000 people have registered as of Friday morning when we were recording this program to participate. The march in White Plains is from 1 to 4 p.m. They're supposed to meet at the Post Road School at 1 and then march down to the county office building, statue of Martin Luther King, for a rally.
The master of nonviolent protest, Dr. Martin Luther King. And the railroad station, in articles appearing in your paper the last couple of weeks, has indicated that they are going to be starting up on March 19th.
Well, we know that Metro-North, they've allocated the money. We know that they plan to make station improvements. We had thought that there would be some reconstruction going on, but apparently it's going to be mostly cosmetic improvements.
A few walls, better
refurbishing.
restrooms. God knows that's going to bring people to White Plains.
Putting in recharging stations for cell phones and things of that
Yeah,
nature.
but there is nothing that is going to bring in development and revenue. This is a missed opportunity.
Well, the city's working on it, so you know sometimes these things take time.
Well, I mean, on top of the train station. I mean, look at some of the. Well, anyway.
And actually, you know, that whole idea may be null and void and moot because on April 9th we may no longer be around.
That's true.
And if we look at the Trump the President segment on April 9th, the fate of the world will be in jeopardy. Seriously, folks, that's the day John Bolton will replace General H.R. McMaster as President Trump's security advisor. Who is John Bolton? John Bolton is an extreme warmonger. He advocates launching first strikes against North Korea and Iran to start nuclear wars. Don't believe me? He wrote about this. He wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal about a month ago. He's such a radical that when President George W. Bush nominated him to become ambassador to the UN, Republicans in the U.S. Senate were so scared of his recklessness that they refused to confirm him to the UN position. Bush got him into the UN through a recess appointment made when Congress is out of session, no confirmation necessary. Bolton has already gotten this country into war. He, along with former Vice President Dick Cheney, pushed President Bush into invading Iraq. Remember the lies about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction? Think John Bolton. Bolton is the darling of the radical commentators on Fox News, which Trump watches all the time, instead of reading things such as presidential briefing books, and any kind of books for that matter. Remember, starting a war was exactly what Hitler did to consolidate his power. Now, Trump has said he wants to eliminate term limits on the presidency and take over for life. Now they're trying to spin that into saying that Trump was only joking at the time. Any bets on whether he was just joking?
I don't think he was joking at all.
John Dowd has quit as lead lawyer for Trump in the corruption, collusion, and money laundering investigation. He quit a few days after Trump brought in a lawyer who makes frequent appearances on, guess what, John?
Fox News, yes.
Joe DeGenova. DeGenova often spouts right-wing conspiracy theories when he's interviewed on Fox. His wife, who is also an attorney, also is a Fox favorite for pushing conspiracy theories. Trump's announcement that he wants $60 billion a year in tariffs slapped on China sent the stock market into a dive of more than 700 points yesterday. China has threatened to retaliate, and if a trade war with China now starts, everything we buy will cost more. U.S. intelligence agencies have found out who Guccifer 2 is, the hacker who hacked into the Democrats' emails. They've determined that he's a Russian intelligence officer, and they even know his name. So during the campaign, when Trump was saying that he hoped the Russians could find more emails, he really was sending a message to a Russian intelligence officer. The $1.3 trillion federal spending plan passed in Congress may be vetoed by President Trump. That's what he tweeted this morning. He may veto it. That would shut down the government. Congress has gone home, so nothing could be done to get something else through Congress. While it does increase spending for the military, it also fails to cut spending for environmental research, the arts, the National Institutes of Health, which got $3 billion more than expected. The bill rejects most of the education cuts sought by Education Secretary Betsy DeVos and Trump. 60 Minutes this Sunday, 60 Minutes, CBS, 7 o'clock. Stormy Daniels will be interviewed.
Must-see TV.
CBS says they're going to play the Stormy Daniels interview this Sunday.
Barring a lawsuit
7
or a
p.m.,
show
60
cause
minutes.
order. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Show cause order. Don't you? That really fits here. Right. Exactly. Now, congratulations to the best darn Department of Public Works on the planet, the White Plains Department of Public Works. It snowed again.
The
third
roads
snowstorm.
were pretty good in White Plains.
This is file
you must
snow,
admit.
ladies and gentlemen.
File
snow.
File footage.
Well, no fake news here. Right.
Yeah. You know, we had a fairly light storm this week, and even while it was still snowing out there, the plows were out, the salters, the sanders were out. I don't think they use sand anymore. The salt, whatever salt they use. The White Plains roads were just superb. It was really good, and they did a wonderful job once again of piling up the snow in front of my driveway when the plows went by.
Yeah. Well, this is part of their modus operandi, just letting you know that they're there.
Well, they did that for sure.
But listen, great job, and I mean, it's really great. I mean, my wife even went to Bridge on Thursday morning. Went to Bridge, no problem. And people said, you went out in that? And she said, of course, the streets were fine in White Plains. John Bailey, Jim Benerofe, Peter Katz, good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.